The lobby of the Heaven's Gate Hotel shimmered like a palace of wealth. Marble floors, chandeliers that looked like they were made of sunlight, and staff moving like clockwork under the sharp eyes of their manager, Diana Cole. She was polished, proud, and painfully rude to anyone who didn't look like they belonged. That morning, a man walked through the grand glass doors. No entourage, no designer suit, no sunglasses or flash. Just a worn leather backpack, jeans that had seen better days, and a face that carried the calm of someone who didn't need to prove anything. His name was Jonathan Roumie. He walked up to the front desk, smiled kindly, and placed a small envelope on the counter. "Good morning," he said softly. "I have a reservation under Roumie, just for one night." The receptionist looked up, raised an eyebrow, and gave him that condescending smile only the arrogant have perfected. "Uh-huh. And I suppose next you'll tell me you're a celebrity, right?" Jonathan smiled faintly. "No, just a guest." The woman sighed dramatically, tapping her manicured nails on the desk. "I'm sorry, sir, but this is a luxury hotel. You might want to try somewhere more affordable. We have a dress code here." A few guests nearby turned to look, some curious, some amused. Jonathan remained calm. His tone never changed. "Could you please check the reservation again?" The receptionist rolled her eyes, clicked a few keys, then laughed. "Oh, this is rich. You did make a booking, but that suite's reserved for a VIP arriving today, so either you used a fake name or you're trying to scam your way in." Jonathan's eyes softened. "That's not what this is." Her patience snapped. She grabbed the paper from the printer, tore it in half, and dropped it into the bin. "Reservation canceled. Goodbye." The lobby went silent. You could hear the hum of the chandelier above. Jonathan didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He simply nodded once and whispered, "Sometimes people judge the wrong things." He turned to walk away, and in that moment, everyone thought the quiet man had lost. But what no one knew was that he owned the very ground they stood on, and in less than 5 minutes, that truth would turn the entire hotel upside down. The Heaven's Gate. Hotel wasn't just a place to stay. It was a stage where power performed every single day. The chandeliers sparkled like they knew they were better than everyone else. The staff moved quickly, heads down, voices polite but fearful. And at the center of it all was manager Diana Cole. Tall, sleek, and sharp as a diamond. To her, kindness was weakness, and money was the only language worth speaking. That Monday morning, she strutted across the marble floor, her heels clicking like a metronome of authority. She barked orders at the bellboys, snapped at a clerk for smiling too long at a guest, and lectured a housekeeper for being too friendly. "Remember," she said, straightening her designer jacket, "this hotel is about class. Don't let anyone in who doesn't look like they belong." Her words hung in the air like perfume. Sweet, toxic, and unforgettable. And just as she said it, the glass doors opened. A man walked in, quiet, calm, completely unbothered by the whirlwind of luxury around him. No expensive luggage, no bodyguards, no noise. Just simplicity wrapped in confidence. Jonathan Roumie. He paused for a second, taking in the lobby, not to admire it, but as if remembering something deeper. He'd walked through these halls before, years ago, when the hotel was still a dream and not yet a reality. But now he stood there not as a guest, but as the hidden owner, testing the heart of the place he'd helped build. He approached the front desk. The receptionist, Lydia, didn't even greet him. Her eyes flicked from his worn backpack to his shoes, and the judgment was instant. "Yes?" she said flatly. Jonathan gave a soft smile. "Good morning. I have a reservation under Roumie." Lydia sighed, already annoyed. "Sir, this is a 5-star property. We require proper attire, membership, and deposit verification before—" Jonathan gently set his ID and credit card on the counter. "Everything should be there." She glanced at them, then frowned. "Roumie, huh? You look familiar. Are you some kind of actor?" He smiled. "Something like that," her tone sharpened. "Well, this reservation looks like an error. That suite's been flagged for VIP arrival." Jonathan nodded. "That's right." "It's mine," Lydia laughed, a cruel performative sound. "Yours? Oh, please. That suite costs more per night than your entire outfit." Behind her, manager Diana noticed the exchange. She walked over, radiating authority. "What's going on here, Lydia?" "This gentleman's trying to check into the VIP suite, ma'am," Lydia said, crossing her arms. Diana's eyes raked over Jonathan like he was something the rain had dragged in. "And what's your business here, sir?" Jonathan met her gaze calmly. "I just came to rest. It's been a long week." "Well," Diana said, voice dripping with sarcasm, "our long week rates start at $15,000 a night. So unless you've got a miracle in that backpack, I suggest you find somewhere else." A few guests nearby chuckled. One even pulled out a phone to record. Jonathan didn't flinch. He didn't defend himself. He simply said, "All I ask is a little respect." Diana rolled her eyes. "Respect is earned, not handed out to strangers." Jonathan's eyes softened. "Sometimes strangers are the ones who test whether you deserve it." The lobby fell silent for a moment. The kind of silence that happens right before a storm. Then Diana snapped her fingers toward Lydia. "Cancel his booking." Lydia hesitated. "But ma'am, the system shows—" "I said cancel it now." Lydia clicked a few buttons, printed out the reservation and, under Diana's smirk, tore it cleanly in half. Jonathan watched quietly as the pieces drifted into the bin. "Goodbye, Mr. Roumie," Diana said coldly. "We don't serve imposters here." For a moment, Jonathan said nothing. His eyes drifted around the lobby, to the bellboy being scolded for smiling, to the cleaner who'd just been told to hide when guests arrived, to the staff who looked terrified to breathe wrong. He nodded once, almost sadly. "You've made that very clear." Then he turned and began to walk toward the exit, calm, unshaken, almost glowing with quiet strength. Guests whispered. Phones recorded. Some pitied him. Others laughed. But the old concierge, who'd been working there since the hotel first opened, frowned deeply. He'd seen that face before, on the wall, in a framed photo beside the founder's signature. He whispered under his breath, "Oh no, that's him." But it was too late. The man they'd just humiliated wasn't an ordinary guest. He was the very heart behind the name Heaven's Gate, and in just a few minutes, everyone inside would find out exactly what humility and justice looked like. The heavy glass doors of the Heaven's Gate Hotel closed behind Jonathan with a soft click. But the tension inside remained thick as smoke. Lydia, the receptionist, exhaled and brushed her hands together. "Good riddance," she muttered, forcing a laugh to shake off the discomfort still hanging in the air. Manager Diana smirked, adjusting her jacket like a general after a victory. "Another pretender trying to live above his means," she said proudly. "This is why we have standards." A few staff members nodded obediently, afraid to disagree. But not everyone was convinced. The old concierge, Mr. Howard, stared at the door where Jonathan had just exited. His wrinkled hands trembled slightly as he reached under the counter and pulled out a small photo frame. The one every employee passed by each morning but never truly looked at. It was a picture of the hotel's grand opening. And right in the center, beside the founder and the investors, stood Jonathan Roumie, smiling humbly, holding the same calm presence he'd carried just moments ago. Mr. Howard's throat tightened. "Oh, dear Lord," he whispered. That was him. That was Mr. Roumie. He turned toward Diana. "Ma'am, I think you just made a terrible mistake." Diana raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "That man, the one you just threw out, he's not a scammer. He's one of the hotel's new owners. His picture's right here." The color drained from Lydia's face as she glanced at the photo. The resemblance was undeniable. Diana, however, forced a laugh. "That can't be him. Owners don't walk in dressed like backpackers." Mr. Howard's voice grew firm. "Maybe that's the point." The words echoed across the marble lobby like a crack of thunder. Before Diana could respond, the automatic doors slid open again. The rhythmic sound of polished shoes and urgent voices filled the air. 3 executives entered. 2 men in dark suits and a woman holding a folder marked Private Property Transfer. Behind them followed a security detail, the kind usually reserved for board members, not guests. "Where is Mr. Roumie?" the lead executive demanded. "We were told he'd arrived." Every head turned. The staff froze. The guests fell silent. Lydia's voice trembled. "He was here a few minutes ago. We, had a misunderstanding." Jonathan reappeared from outside, calm as ever, his eyes soft but unreadable. "Don't worry," he said. The misunderstanding was quite clear. The executives rushed over. "Mr. Roumie, we've been waiting for you. We're ready to finalize the ownership documents for this branch." The silence that followed was absolute. Diana blinked, her voice cracking. Ownership? Jonathan nodded slowly. Yes, I came to check on how things were being run. Anonymously. Lydia took a step back, stammering. Sir, we didn't know, it was all a mix-up. Jonathan looked around at the staff, then at Diana. His expression wasn't angry, Elamrus. It was disappointed. The kind of disappointment that weighs more than fury ever could. You didn't have to know who I was, he said gently. You only had to remember who you were supposed to be. Diana tried to recover. Sir, please, this was a misunderstanding. We follow strict policies to protect our image. Jonathan interrupted softly. Your image? Or your ego? The question hit her like a slap. The executives exchanged uneasy glances. Guests whispered, phones recording every second. Jonathan continued, his voice calm but commanding. I built this place to be more than luxury, he said. It was meant to be a sanctuary, a space of dignity and kindness. Yet today I found pride where there should have been grace. He turned toward Lydia. You laughed at me for looking simple, but tell me, does a uniform make you kind? Does a suit make you better? Lydia's eyes welled with tears. No, sir. I'm sorry. Jonathan faced Diana one last time. And you, Ms. Cole, I gave you leadership, but you chose arrogance. I gave you authority and you turned it into cruelty. She tried to speak, but no words came out. Jonathan looked around the lobby, now filled with the silence of realization. Then he said quietly, It's time for some changes around here. He motioned to the executives. Please make note. Effective immediately, every employee here will undergo humility and service retraining. And as for management, he paused, glancing at Diana. Her eyes pleaded silently. Please, Mr. Roumie, I didn't mean, he raised a hand gently. Meaningless words are easy after damage is done. He turned to Mr. Howard, the elderly concierge who'd tried to speak up. Mr. Howard, thank you for remembering. From this moment, you'll serve as acting branch manager until we find someone who understands that leadership begins with compassion. The room erupted in whispers. Shock, awe, disbelief. Jonathan gave a small nod, then turned toward the doors once again. He didn't shout. He didn't gloat. He simply left behind a silence heavier than guilt and a lesson that would echo in that hotel forever. Because sometimes, the most powerful revenge is grace that doesn't need to raise its voice. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped inside the Heaven's Gate Hotel. The grand chandelier above flickered, catching the reflection of stunned faces, guests, staff, and even the executives who couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. The manager who had strutted through the lobby with pride now stood frozen, her confidence melting away like wax under the heat of truth. Diana's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her mind scrambled for an explanation, a way to undo what had just happened. But there was none. The man she had mocked was the man who signed her paycheck. Lydia, the receptionist, still stood behind the counter, hands trembling. Her eyes darted toward the trash bin, the one where she had tossed the torn reservation paper. Half of it still clung to the edge, the name Roumie printed clearly for all to see. Her throat went dry. If only I had looked twice. If only I hadn't laughed. The other employees, the bellboys, the housekeepers, the clerks, shifted uncomfortably, their faces filled with guilt. Many had laughed earlier. Others had stayed silent. Only one, the old concierge, Mr. Howard, had recognized the truth in time. Jonathan Roumie, meanwhile, stood near the center of the lobby, still and composed, the same calm presence as before. He wasn't angry. He wasn't triumphant. His silence spoke louder than any lecture. The executives were speaking among themselves in low, nervous tones. Sir, one finally said, stepping forward. Would you like us to remove Ms. Cole from the premises immediately? Jonathan turned his gaze toward Diana. She looked terrified, eyes wet, shoulders trembling. For the first time since he entered the hotel, she didn't look powerful. She looked human. He took a breath. No, let her stay. For now. The whisper spread instantly. He's forgiving her? Jonathan's voice carried softly through the lobby. If I fire her today, she'll leave angry. But if she stays, maybe she'll learn what leadership really means. He turned his attention to the room, not just to the staff, but to the guests who had watched everything unfold like a scene from a movie. You all came here expecting luxury, he said. But luxury means nothing without respect. You can polish the floors, hang diamonds from the ceiling, charge $1,000 a night. But if you can't treat a stranger with kindness, you've built nothing. No one moved. Not even the children whispering in the corner. Mr. Howard stepped forward, bowing his head slightly. Sir, on behalf of the staff, I apologize. This place lost its heart. You gave it back, Jonathan nodded gently. You kept the heart alive, Mr. Howard. You remembered what we stand for. He turned to the executives. Promote him. Effective immediately. The elderly man's eyes widened. Sir, Jonathan smiled. You've earned it. Applause began to ripple softly through the room, hesitant at first, then louder as the staff and guests joined in. The sound filled the lobby like healing after a storm. Diana's legs weakened. She reached out to the counter for balance. Mr. Roumie, she whispered. I was wrong. I let pride blind me. I don't deserve forgiveness. Jonathan walked closer, his expression kind but firm. Deserving has nothing to do with it. Forgiveness is given and not earned, but the lesson you learn afterward, that's what matters. She nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. I'll change. I promise. He placed a hand lightly on the counter. Change doesn't start with promises. It starts with people. He looked around the lobby. Every single person who walks through these doors deserves respect, whether they wear silk or dust. A guest in a tailored suit, who had earlier laughed at Jonathan's appearance, lowered his head in shame. He's right, he murmured to his wife. We all judged him. Jonathan began to walk toward the exit once more, his steps slow and silent, the echo of his shoes mixing with the sound of murmured apologies. But just before he reached the doors, he turned slightly and said one final thing. Kindness isn't weakness. It's the truest form of strength. Because when the world mocks you for being gentle, and you stay gentle anyway, that's real power. Then he walked out into the afternoon light, the glass doors closing softly behind him. Inside, no one spoke for nearly a full minute, and when they finally did, it wasn't in laughter or gossip. It was in quiet, humbled voices, the sound of a place finally remembering what it was meant to be. By the time Jonathan Roumie stepped outside the glass doors of Heaven's Gate Hotel, the late afternoon light had turned golden, soft, forgiving, and warm. It wrapped around him like peace itself. But inside those doors, chaos was blooming. Diana Cole stood frozen at the front desk, her mind replaying every word, every smirk, every cruel laugh. Her throat tightened. I mocked him. I mocked the man who built this place. Lydia sank into her chair, face pale. Guests whispered in the corners, recording videos, texting, calling friends. You won't believe this, the guy they kicked out owns the hotel. The executives, meanwhile, scrambled to handle the situation. One of them, a tall man with gray temples named Mr. Harris, cleared his throat and addressed the staff. Everyone, listen carefully. As of this morning, Mr. Jonathan Roumie officially became the majority stakeholder in Heaven's Gate International. This property, along with 5 others, now falls directly under his leadership. Gasps rippled through the lobby. Mr. Harris continued. He wasn't visiting as a celebrity or guest. He came unannounced to observe how we treat people, how we represent the Heaven's Gate name. The words hit the staff like lightning. Each one of them could suddenly see every mistake, every impatient tone, every rolled eye, every fake smile. Diana felt her knees weaken. He came to test us, she murmured. Mr. Harris nodded. Yes, and from what I've seen today, I think we failed that test. The air grew heavy again. Lydia began to cry silently. Mr. Howard stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Failure isn't final, he said softly. It's what we do next that counts. Just then, the glass doors opened once more. The hum of an engine outside faded as the same black car that had brought the executives earlier returned. The driver stepped out and opened the rear door. Jonathan Roumie emerged, calm, radiant, almost glowing in the fading sunlight. The noise of the lobby softened instantly, as if the building itself held its breath. He walked in slowly, eyes scanning the room, not with judgment but with understanding. Mr. Harris spoke first. Sir, the staff is assembled. They understand what happened. Jonathan nodded. Good. He walked toward the center of the lobby, every step quiet but deliberate. Then turning to face everyone, he said, I didn't come here to humiliate anyone. I came here to remind everyone, including myself, what this place was built on. His voice was steady, warm. Heaven's Gate wasn't meant to be a symbol of luxury. It was meant to be a sanctuary, where people could rest, feel seen, and be treated with grace no matter who they are. He looked at Lydia. When you tore up that reservation, I saw more than arrogance. I saw fear. Fear of losing control, fear of being judged, fear of being small. That's what pride really is. Fear wearing expensive clothes. Lydia's tears flowed freely. "I'm sorry, sir," she whispered. Jonathan nodded gently. "Don't be sorry. Be better." Then he turned toward Diana, who stood motionless. Her eyes glistened. "Sir," she said softly, "I understand now. I've been leading with image, not with heart. I forgot that service isn't servitude. It's grace," Jonathan smiled in faint approving. "Grace begins the moment ego ends." He paused, then continued. "From today onward, this hotel will change. Policies will change. Culture will change. Titles will not define respect. Actions will." The staff straightened. Guests leaned in, recording captivated. Jonathan went on. "Every guest who walks through these doors deserves kindness, not because of who they are, but because of who we choose to be." He turned to Mr. Howard. "And to remind us of that, I'm appointing someone who already understands it. Mr. Howard will serve as branch manager until further notice." Applause broke out across the lobby. Genuine this time. Not forced. Diana joined in, tears falling freely. Lydia clapped too, though her hands shook. Even the guests, who had once laughed, now applauded. Jonathan raised a hand gently to quiet them. "And one more thing," he said. "Every member of this staff will receive full hospitality retraining, not in how to serve, but in how to see. Because true service isn't about bending, and it's about lifting." He smiled softly. "When you lift others, you never stand lower. You rise together." The silence that followed was reverent, the kind that doesn't need applause. Jonathan looked around one last time. "Remember this moment. Not because you saw me, but because you saw yourselves." He turned, gave a nod to Mr. Harris, and walked back out into the light, leaving behind a hotel forever changed, and a lesson that no amount of money could buy. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the tall lobby windows of Heaven's Gate Hotel, the same place that had witnessed humiliation, revelation, and redemption just a day before, but it didn't feel the same. Something in the air had changed. The tension was gone. The arrogance had evaporated. For the first time in years, laughter, real laughter, echoed softly between the marble pillars. Mr. Howard, now wearing a manager's badge that gleamed modestly on his vest, stood near the front desk, greeting every guest personally. His voice carried warmth, not command. "Welcome to Heaven's Gate. We're honored to have you here." The staff, we are from bellboys to receptionists, moved with purpose, not fear. Every good morning was genuine. Every smile real. Even Lydia, the receptionist who once mocked Jonathan, now stood straighter. Not with pride, but with resolve. A small note taped inside her drawer read, "Don't judge the guest by the suit. Judge yourself by your service." And as she handed a key card to a family checking in, she caught herself smiling without effort. The mother thanked her. Lydia felt something she hadn't in years, joy. In the staff lounge upstairs, Diana Cole sat alone, her usual sharp posture replaced by humility. Her designer jacket hung on a chair beside her. She was dressed simply now. No jewelry, no pretense. She stared at the report in her hands, the new staff conduct guidelines Jonathan had introduced overnight. It wasn't filled with corporate jargon or fancy rules. Just 3 sentences printed neatly at the top of the page. Lead with kindness. Listen before speaking. Serve with grace, not greed. Diana traced her finger over the words. This is what I forgot, she thought. This is what I was supposed to protect. A knock sounded at the door. Mr. Howard stepped in, holding 2 cups of coffee. You look like someone who could use this, he said kindly. Diana smiled faintly. I probably don't deserve it. He set the cup in front of her. Maybe not yesterday, but today's a new day. Start with that. For a moment she said nothing. Then she asked, Do you think he meant it when what he said about me staying? Howard nodded. Mr. Roumie doesn't do anything without meaning it. He saw something in you, not perfection but potential. Diana exhaled, her eyes softening. Then I'll make sure he wasn't wrong. Downstairs, the executives met in the boardroom. Jonathan's influence was already spreading across the company. Every Heaven's Gate property in the chain was now required to implement what he called the Grace Standard. It wasn't about luxury. It was about humanity. One executive read aloud the new directive. Every guest, employee, and stranger must be treated as if they could own the building, because in a way they do. Every kind act builds Heaven's Gate higher. That phrase would later be engraved on a plaque near the hotel entrance. By noon, the story had already hit social media. Clips of the incident, the confrontation, the reveal, Jonathan's speech, had gone viral. Headlines read, "Actor turned hotel owner teaches arrogant staff a lesson in grace. Jonathan Roumie's silent power stuns luxury hotel. Kindness is the new luxury." People around the world commented, "This man just redefined leadership. He didn't yell. He didn't humiliate. He inspired." Meanwhile, Jonathan stayed quiet. He didn't post about it, didn't celebrate the viral fame. He had already moved on to his next destination, his next lesson. Late that evening, as the hotel lights dimmed and guests settled into their rooms, Diana stood by the front desk watching the soft glow of the lobby. Lydia approached her. "Ma'am, I finished the training outline you asked for." Diana smiled, a real smile, humble and warm. "Thank you, Lydia, and please, call me Diana." They both laughed softly. Outside, the night was calm. The reflection of the hotel name shimmered on the glass. Heaven's Gate. But now it wasn't just a name. It was a reminder, a promise. Diana looked up, her eyes glistening. "Heaven's Gate," she whispered. "Maybe it finally means what it was supposed to." Somewhere far away, Jonathan Roumie watched the news footage replay on a small screen in his car. He smiled faintly, shook his head, and whispered, "Lesson learned." Then he closed his eyes, said a quiet prayer for the people inside that hotel, and drove off into the night, leaving behind a place no longer built on pride, but on purpose, because sometimes the greatest change doesn't come from power. It comes from patience, and that's exactly what Heaven's Gate had just found. A week passed, and the story of what happened at Heaven's Gate Hotel became more than just a viral headline. It became a movement. People everywhere were talking about it. Teachers discussed it in classrooms. Business leaders shared it in meetings. Even churches and motivational speakers began quoting Jonathan Roumie's words. Respect isn't something you show when you think someone's important. It's something you show because you are. Inside the hotel, the transformation was undeniable. Guests who once came for luxury now came for peace. They said there was something different about Heaven's Gate. Something pure in the way they were greeted, helped and cared for. No one could quite explain it, but everyone could feel it. Every morning, Diana now stood in the lobby at 8 a.m., not to inspect the staff count, but to greet them. She'd say, "Good morning, everyone," and they'd respond with smiles that didn't have to be forced. In her hand, she carried a small notebook labeled Lessons from Jonathan. Inside, she'd written, "Power without humility is poison. Leadership isn't a title. It's a tone. Kindness doesn't cost anything, but arrogance will cost you everything." Each line was a reminder, a reflection of the man who walked in quietly, got denied a room, and walked out having changed an entire company. Far away, in a modest home near the ocean, Jonathan Roumie sat alone on his porch. No reporters, no fanfare, just the sound of waves brushing the shore and a warm cup of coffee in his hands. His phone buzzed with hundreds of messages, from journalists, CEOs, even strangers thanking him for reminding them what true leadership looks like. He smiled, set the phone aside, and whispered to himself, it was never about a hotel. It was about a heart. He thought about Diana, Mr. Howard, and Lydia. He knew they were changing, not because they feared him, but because they'd seen who they could be. And that, he believed, was the real miracle. Because the truth is, everyone is running a hotel of their own, the heart. Guests come and go, anger, pride, fear, kindness, love. The question is, which ones do you welcome and which do you turn away? Jonathan had learned long ago that the real five-star experience in life doesn't come from chandeliers or fine wine, but from how you treat the soul standing in front of you. Later that month, Heaven's Gate held a small ceremony to unveil a new plaque at the entrance. It read, "Dedicated to every guest who was once judged, To every worker who was once overlooked. To every person who believes humility is not weakness, but wisdom. Jonathan Roumie. As the staff and guests applauded, Diana looked toward the door, half expecting to see Jonathan walk in. But he didn't. He was never one to seek attention still. His presence lingered. Not in the room, but in the way people spoke, smiled, and served. Howard took the microphone and said quietly, "Jonathan taught us something we'll never forget. You don't have to raise your voice to make an impact. You just have to raise your heart." The audience clapped, some with tears in their eyes. Lydia stepped forward and whispered to Diana, I still remember the look on his face when I turned him away. But somehow, he forgave me before I even asked." Diana smiled gently. "That's what grace looks like, Lydia. It doesn't wait for an apology. It creates one." Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in gold and violet. The light reflected off the hotel windows, making them glow like gates of heaven themselves. If you passed by that night, you'd see something magical. Not luxury, not wealth, but warmth. The kind that comes only when people remember that every soul deserves respect. Because Jonathan Roumie didn't just own a hotel. He owned the lesson that no classroom could teach. True power doesn't shout. It shines. True leadership doesn't dominate. It uplifts. And true wealth isn't measured in what you have, but in how you make others feel. So if you're reading this right now, remember, the next time someone looks down on you, stay calm. The next time you're tempted to look down on someone else, stay kind, because life has a funny way of flipping the story. Today's nobody might be tomorrow's somebody. And the real test of character isn't how you treat the rich, and it's how you treat the ones who can't give you anything back. Now it's your turn. Should Jonathan visit the hotel again to see what they've become, or let them carry the lesson on their own? Type return if you want him to come back. Type move on if you think his work there is done. And if you believe humility is true strength, type respect in the comments. Let's fill the feed with grace today.